Joe Rogan reacted to Woody Harrelson's controversial SNL monologue from last week. Let's watch.
Did you hear Woody Harrelson on SNL?
Yeah. Did you see that immediately after Woody Harrelson had that monologue on SNL where he's joking around about a drug company forcing you to take their drug? Right after it, the next day, there's all these hit pieces. Like they were timed. Like there's a hit piece in Vox, there's a hit piece in Vanity Fair, there's a hit piece calling him an anti-vaxxer and a stoner.
He sucked on Cheers.
And there's conspiracy theories. Instead of saying it sucked, or instead of saying, hey, stick to acting, instead, no, it's like they all wanted to jump in to defend the vaccine. They all wanted to jump in and defend the pharmaceutical companies from this anti-vaxxer stoner. When he makes that joke and he talks about them buying all the media, and then all the media responds as if they've been bought and paid for. That's pretty wild.
In a post-monologue interview with the New York Times, Harrelson went on to slam COVID mitigation measures, particularly as it comes to Hollywood film sets. When asked what's wrong with COVID protocol, Harrelson responded, quote, "The fact that they're still going on. I don't think that anybody should have the right to demand that you're forced to do the testing, forced to wear the mask, and forced to get vaccinated 3 years on. I'm just like, let's be done with this nonsense. It's not fair to the crews. I don't have to wear the mask. Why should they? Why should they have to be vaccinated? How's that not up to the individual? I shouldn't be talking about this."
Harrelson continued, quote, "It makes me angry for the crew, the anarchist part of me. I don't feel that we should have forced testing, forced masking, and forced vaccination. It's not a free country. Really, I'm talking about the crew because I can get out of wearing a mask. I can test less. I'm not in the same position they're in, but it's wrong. It's 3 years. Stop."
Yeah,
those are my sentiments.
Yeah, so I think that with respect to the vaccination, because for the reasons that we've discussed repeatedly on this podcast, that there isn't the evidence that it lowers the risk of transmission the way that it was initially represented, that there's not a lot of solid scientific rationale for requiring the vaccinations. The same argument that we make about the tennis player that wasn't able to come into the country because he wasn't vaccinated. I mean, what is the actual risk here? He can still transmit COVID. Having had COVID recently is a similar protection level than getting the shot and all of those kinds of things. Okay. With respect to the masking on sets, I think that in this particular field, it's actually a closer issue. Because the reason that Woody Harrelson isn't asked to wear a mask on set isn't because he's like elite and wonderful and all the peons have to bow and scrape before him. It's because he's an actor. His job is to go in there, get makeup put on his face, stand in front of a camera, and act without a mask on. So the actors are in a position where you can't just make the argument one-way masking works. If you want a mask, you can mask. If you don't want a mask, you shouldn't be forced to mask. You can't make that argument with actors who are forced to be maskless on the set. So then the question becomes, does that put an obligation on the other people on set? Not just crew, but producers and people at all levels of elitism within the movie-making business. Does that put an obligation on them to then do what they can do to mitigate the risk for the actors who don't have the choice to control their own risk?
Sure. I don't like, I think that should be up to them. If they want to, that's fine. I don't like the idea, though, of creating this, second tier of society, the people who are not in front of the cameras, who are, we see at all those awards dinners and
that's a little
where the
different.
Staff are being, again, if they want to, it's fine.
I think that the awards dinners are different because you can go to an award dinner and mask. Maybe you can make an argument that if you're giving the speech at the podium, you should unmask. Yeah. But everyone there could mask. So the fact that there's 2 tiers is actually 2 tiers. But in a movie set, what is separating the masked from the unmasked people is not your income, is not your hierarchy on the set list. The person who financed the film should still be required to wear a mask, and I presume does have to wear a mask on set. It's only the people who are literally in front of the camera, whose faces are the moneymakers, who are unmasked, which makes sense.
I'm frankly surprised that they're still we're not generally requiring masks in most contexts outside of perhaps university campuses or something.
Well, the other reason they've been doing it in Hollywood, and frankly, Hollywood has had remarkably low transmission rates, is because it is so expensive to have to shut down recording. And if one of the actors, if one of the talent gets sick, you still have I mean, at that point, you obviously can't be walking around set with COVID, coughing on all the other actors. You're going to lose millions of dollars, potentially millions of dollars a day on these movie sets. So there are real financial reasons why these folks have implemented these policies. It's not just like wokeism or hyperliberalism or anything like that. Like, there's a business interest here.
On the earlier part about the media coming after Woody Harrelson, Rogan his point is absolutely correct. I saw a lot of this too, including in my favorite, I say that derisively, I've had a lot of beef with this magazine in the past, Rolling Stone, which is a culture and music magazine that I think used to be part of like a counterculture and, celebrating bold, provocative kind of performers and stuff. No, it's again, I'm using this word a lot lately, but it's very hall monitor-y. So this is the headline from Rolling Stone. Woody Harrelson spreads anti-vax conspiracies during SNL monologue. How dare he joke about something we don't approve of? It's just so lame and pathetic.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I used to love writing for Rolling Stone back in the Taibbi days when it had that Taibbi era about it. And it does seem to have been putting out a lot of scolding content of late.
Very scolding.
They
never recovered from I don't know, they should have recovered. They did recover from it in that they're still an entity, and maybe they still have cultural cachet, I don't really know, but the whole, when they famously published an account of a gang sexual assault at the University of Virginia that turned out to be completely made up. And were sued and lost.
Yeah. I also think the paywall doesn't help these days.
I know, I'm reading this in incognito mode.
But yeah, look, I like Woody Harrelson. I think most people do. He's very likable. I thought he was great playing the open socialist in Triangle of Sadness recently, and I wonder how much about Triangle of Sadness.
I didn't see that.
It's like there's 3 movies: Triangle of Sadness, The Square, and there's a third one. They've been these.
The Menu.
Is that the same person? I thought that was a different person.
No, it's a different. I don't know if it's a similar plot about.
No, well, it's these movies all have a lot
pigs.
of social commentary.
Yeah.
It's about very wealthy people on a boat who end up basically shipwrecked. It's not really a spoiler. It's right there in the trailer. But he's the captain of the boat, and it has this wonderful scene where he's having dinner with this like Russian oligarch, where they're like quoting, Marx and like Churchill back and forth at each other, justifying their worldviews as the ship is like going down and everyone's puking over this fancy dining room. It's a terrific movie. The point is that when there are people who, have the finger on their pulse, are articulating views that obviously a large number of Americans hold, even if you disagree with them, I think that it behooves folks at the Rolling Stone, at these other major media institutions, to try to engage really in good faith. Because when you oversell your argument, when you start making claims that someone who is maybe critical of the pharmaceutical industry is in fact an anti-vaxxer, instead of making a more nuanced claim, well, maybe he has a point about maybe vaccines not being required, but the masking is difficult for actors. You lose credibility yourself, and the institutions lose credibility.
And just not understanding the anti-authoritarian. There is and has been a healthy anti-authoritarian strain on the left.
Yeah, he's an anarchist.
Right. He says he's a Marxist. He identifies himself with these, and a lot of those people are now, maybe they're not sorting themselves. Well, some of them are sorting themselves as explicitly right. Some of them are just independent. But Russell Brand is another celebrity who I don't know exactly how he would have described his views, but he at least would have been thought of as left, who now is very much outside the bubble. Kim Iverson, former host of this show, kind of a similar trajectory. Right, she wouldn't say she really changed any of her beliefs, but what progressives prioritize has shifted, or the way they challenge power is they still challenge it on some things. Well, you probably say they don't challenge it enough.
Yeah,
but it's very the kind of like force people to take medical interventions.
That's the risk of not having any real left representation on any kind of high level. These so-called progressives in Congress are people who champion corporate actors like Hakeem Jeffries, who are openly solicitous of major lobbying groups like DMFI and AIPAC, who are willing to throw core progressive beliefs under the bus and laud figures like Joe Biden, who AOC once said in a normal country wouldn't be in the same political party as her if there were real ideological diversity. And you're seeing that ideological diversity on the right. You see open disagreements on the right. You saw the force the vote moment last month or earlier this year on the right. And there's none of that on the left. And what ends up happening is that when people feel ideologically homeless, they leave the party, and some of them are even going to find themselves over on the right, which is why I so appreciate people like Nathan Robinson, who've been writing about like libertarian socialism and talking about how it's the authoritarianism that people associate with socialism historically that we agree very much is a problem, but that is not a necessary part of socialism any more than it's a necessary part of capitalism. And we're all trying to be anti-authoritarian, and that sometimes means taking a hard look at policies like vaccine mandates that even if I ideologically support and think are scientifically valuable, you have to think about what that means as a broader policy standard for society and whether or not we can use carrots rather than sticks to influence behavior in a way that still protects our freedoms.
Indeed. All right, that does it for this segment, but we have more Rising coming up right after this.